Okay, and welcome everyone. What a pleasure it is to have you all here. We'll see more people coming in just a moment. We have with us today on the Smashing Hour, which is just a very informal meeting of like-minded individuals who care about things on the web, like CSS maybe. We have Amit Sheen with us today. I'm very happy to have Amit because I think it's very difficult to find a person who is more excited about CSS transitions and animations across many other things than Amit. Amit, hello and welcome. How are you doing today?
Hello, Vitaly. I'm doing great. Very excited, very nervous. Thank you for having me here.
It's my pleasure. Of course, it's my pleasure. So
And yes, I am excited about CSS.
we have to just jump right into it. So I know that you're author, you're a speaker, you're a developer, obviously, right? There are all the things that are, very much symbolic in our industry, and I'm really appreciating of all the articles that you write and all the stuff that you kind of put out there, right? Why animations? I mean, there are so many things you could do in life. You could be an engineer, you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, and you decided to spend your life with CSS animations.
Actually, it's not. It's a complicated question because, first of all, the way to animation, it was a journey. Okay, I've started coding way back, like in 1987 on my Commodore 64, and I like to say
is it
that.
Similar to CSS or a bit different?
No, not CSS. I've started with Basic and Logo and Pascal and those kind of languages. And over the years, I like to say that I've done a little bit of everything, and it's kind of true. I haven't done everything, but I've been a backend developer and a full stack developer for many years. But my passion was always in the front side. And in the past 3.5 years, I said, okay, that's it. I'm now a front end developer, and the second that I started saying that I'm a front-end developer, I started exploring everything from Canvas and actually even from processing and P5 and things through Canvas to obviously CSS. And over the years, I also done a lot of games, small games, casuals, and so exploring CSS through animations, it was just like it was much more what was comfortable for me. Instead of testing a property in 100 pixel and in 1,000 pixels, let's just animate them between them and see what happens. So it's just another way to explore because I was very comfortable with using animations. And that actually got even a bit of another step forward using 3D animation and using perspective, because I spent a lot of time exploring perspective because this is something that really interested me over the years, even back as a game developer and as a child that used to play games on the computer.
Right. So I have a feeling, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you are kind of, if you were living and through the, I mean, that's a stupid question, but I have a feeling that you're kind of a Flash guy. Are you a Flash guy?
Flash guy?
Yeah, were you a Flash guy?
I was a Flash guy, but back at the time I used Macromedia Flash. I've started building website at high school, so it was 96, 97 maybe, just around CSS starting to becoming a thing. And I've built website over the years. Nothing too professional. I've started doing like JavaScript and going a step further in the development process, just like over just 11 years ago. So for many years, it was just like a hobby. I was building very simple HTML, CSS websites, and did a lot of some server work, like with Python and PHP and whatever. But again, I did always wanted things to look nice and to feel nice and to have a nice motion and to feel like they're alive. So every time I had like a chance to touch something that is animated, that is in the front side, I always did it, even as a backend developer.
Right, that makes sense. Excellent. Well, now that we have a few more people coming in, I just want to briefly explain how it works. It's not like we have a pre-written script and we are following the script and I have all the questions written down. If you know me by this point, or I mean, if you know me at this point, I don't believe in script. I believe in conversations. I like good, honest conversations. So this is exactly what it is, most of it, I would say. And we are very much open to your questions. So if there are any things that you would like to ask Amit about, I don't know, maybe Flash, hopefully not, or maybe HTML, email, hopefully not. You can just go and ask, and I'm monitoring what you're writing in the chat, and the chat would be the easiest way to do that, right? I'm going to bring up those questions right here. Maybe just to test the waters, can you write in the chat where you're connecting from today? That would be nice to see. Where are you connecting from today? Right, so we get a bit of a feeling. Greece, oh wow, that's wonderful. Israel, Germany, that's Nico, Freiburg, excellent. Israel, all right. And we've got Israel, South Africa, wow, that's very cool. And Oslo, Tampa, Florida, North Carolina, Slovenia. Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool to see. So I hope the reason why you're here is because we are talking about CSS. And so we better dive right into CSS. I mean, today I woke up and I saw the tweet by Eddie Osmani that, all right, exactly, that container queries are landing in Chrome, well, in the next Chrome, I believe. Is it changing everything?
Well, yes, obviously.
And also maybe you could explain what it is as well.
What to explain what container queries means? Yes. Well, I don't know if we want to get too technical, but just as a general, you can set the style of a component comparing to its own width and not comparing to the viewport size or the page size or whatever it is. So even if you have two components on the page and they both have different width for some reason, like if they're cards or buttons or whatever, you can actually set the style according to their own width and nothing to do with the container or with the viewport. So yeah, as you said, it's a game changer. It's a game changer. Okay, it's a great example of why I love CSS. By the way, we talked about it before, because it's in one way, yes, it's a game changer. It's going to change the way that we're going to write and how we're going to treat layouts in the component way. But on the other hand, it's just like it continues the way of what's happening outside of CSS, because the world outside of CSS already started thinking in components, working in components. So the CSS container query is just a normal evaluation of CSS to this world, and it's a wonderful work. I think it was Miriam Susan that started brought the specs, and it's great because you can see how CSS is both backward compatible for decades and up to date to most new trends and best practices. So that's by itself, it has to, you have to love CSS.
Who isn't? Who doesn't? It's impossible to not love CSS, I think.
Yeah, because again, CSS is so complicated just because it is backward compatible, but it is also up to date. And this container queries is just a great example of what a great job the guys at the working group does of maintaining this great language.
Yeah, so for me, I think this is really more of a fundamental shift. I've been waiting. I mean, I don't know about everybody who is joining us on the call. There are so many things that I was waiting my entire life for. Like my entire life, because I started back in late 90s, and I was playing with Micromedia, well, not Flash, what was it before that? Macromedia, Shockwave.
Oh,
Shockwave at the time. And when CSS came up, one thing I desperately wanted is some sort of way to do more with CSS. And actually, one of them was a parent selector, which we also now could get potentially with the relative selector on has.
I think I was much more excited. You talk about if I'm excited about it and about the container queries, and about the container queries, I think I am reserving a bit of excitement to when it would actually be supported and I can actually use it in real life components. But what I'm really excited about, and I can't hold my excitement about, is the has the parent selector, which is a lot more than parent selector, the has selector. And that is going to be a game changer. That is going to
Yeah.
be make our life so much easier in
Yes,
so many
absolutely.
things. And
Yeah.
this is
So
something that I was been waiting for years.
yeah, so Vig is saying that this is a complicated relationship, and I would say it is, but in many ways, it's just so incredible to see this happening. Because when I think about container queries, and for those of you who may be hearing about it for the first time, essentially the idea is, why do we use so many media queries? Because in the end, if you think about media queries, they're nothing else than if-then statement, right? That's it. And that's usually not a good way of writing, code. And so if we could say, okay, I'm a component, so I'm a date picker, I'm a banner, advertising unit. I mean, in the past, what we had to do is we would have to say, okay, we have different variants with BAM. We would have different variants of, let's say, an advertising unit for a sidebar, for the content area, for the header, and so on. And then depending on where it's placed, we're going to use one class or the other. No need to do that anymore. Instead, you have your advertising unit. You tell the browser, okay, if I'm 500 pixels with max, look like this. If I'm inside of a container that's 700 pixels width, I want to look like this. And this is so scoped, you can forget media queries.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not needed anymore. And so for the relationship, for the parent selector, relationship selector.
Yeah, for things like banners and cards.
Now.
Yeah, for things like banners and cards and everything, even dialog boxes and buttons and everything that is changing width and can have multiple width over your layout. You can actually set the width according to its own width, to its own size, and it's amazing. It is a game changer, but I'm waiting to actually use it because I started playing with container queries about a year ago. I think it was after I seen Kevin Powell's video. I think it was a year ago. So I've been playing with it for a long time, but it was games. I'm really waiting to use it like in a real life component.
Yeah. So that's all very exciting. Mark is writing that Macromedia Shockwave was a plugin for Director and then also Flash. Mark, this was the good old times. Oh yes, I'm not sure about the good old times. By the way, just a bit of an off topic, but just it kind of happens to me every couple of months or so. Just 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a team of designers and developers, and there were some young developers, like maybe 18, 19, I think, on the team. They didn't know what Internet Explorer is. They didn't know that. Is it a good?
They're
and I'm
so
wondering,
lucky. They're
I'm
so
wondering
lucky.
at this point. Yeah, I'm wondering at this point. Is it me just being old or older, or is it a good thing or is it a bad thing?
Well,
so
actually, no. I think that's a good thing because I think it means that we as a community, as a web developer community, we've done something good. We've done Internet Explorer off of the shelf, so we've done something good. They're very lucky that they don't remember those times, but they will have their own hurdles to come by, their own difficulties. Every
do you
generation
think
has.
so? Haven't we just made it so far that everything is? We have this web compatibility thing going on, right, between different browsers. We have when something lands in the browsers, like it was with the grid, it's consistent.
No,
Isn't it
I think
the magic future?
I think that being a CSS developer is like a testament of how much the web is grows and develops, and there's so much more to grow and develop, and I think there is a lot more things to do, and it's like every few months, like you say, I hear somebody tell me, "Oh, AI is going to come in and you're going to lose your job in a few months," and I'm like, okay. It's not going to happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Okay, I'm not going to lose my job for AI. Not in the next couple of months. It's okay. So every couple of years there's different things and technology change and evolves. But they're going to have their own difficulties. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that at this point, who was that? I'm not sure. We just stopped supporting that Explorer 11 at my job. We celebrated. That's definitely a good reason to celebrate, I would say. And Hugo is saying, well, they miss out on the struggle. Not, I mean, I don't know if it's necessary.
Again, I think that they will have their own struggles because people have said for a long time that Safari is the new AI.
Yeah.
But I think Safari kind of got the hint and started working like they
Well,
should.
Safari supports the hash selector,
Yeah,
so
yeah, I know. As I said, Safari got the hint and they started working just fine. But again, browsers are coming and going, and supports for browsers are coming and going, and browsers are the popularity of browsers is varies over time. So I think they will have their own struggles. It's okay. And if
yeah.
they won't have struggles, so good for them. It means that we won't have struggles because we are still developers.
Right, right. I'm wondering at this point, by the way, difference in the chat. Do you remember any Internet Explorer hacks? This is like getting totally off track here. I'm just
Yeah, I
curious.
used to the main hacks I used to do for Internet Explorer are for the grid. There is this grid hack that we used to
Grid gap. Oh no. Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
I don't remember. I remember that we had the hack for the grid. I really don't remember. It was like 3 jobs ago. Who can remember?
Yeah, who remembers that? It's kind of, I'm very hopeful because I don't see anything in the chat regarding that for hacks. So that's probably, we should probably just erase it from the memory if I could. Question. I'm just, at this point, I'm getting to my curious routine. So when we're writing CSS today, would you say that every serious front-end developer needs to have a proper build routine in place with Webpack and with all the things happening behind the scenes, okay, and SAS and all the stuff? Or can you just write simple CSS within simple CSS file? What is your kind of way of writing CSS?
Well, that's a very big question because you need to think about CSS in JS and think about that. If you're talking about this type of conversation, for me, I work with SAS. I've been working with SAS for years, and I think it's for most of the project that I've worked on, it was the most suitable solution. Once you know how to work with SAS, how you know how to build your files, the directory, how to work with property, custom property versus variables, and you need to use some variables and you need to use some custom properties, and it's there's a lot of logistic behind it if you really want to work with SAS. But once you have it figured out, I think SAS is for 9 out of 8 times it's the would be the better solution, or not SAS but some sort of SAS preprocessor. I won't suggest writing straight SAS, straight CSS. Obviously, not obviously, but I think there is still a lot of things today in preprocessor that are just better.
For now. For now.
Why?
Well, because there are a couple of proposals, interesting proposals coming in terms of synthesization. For example, nesting becoming a part of CSS.
Yeah,
right?
but there are things that you like loops and functions, and those are just things that just you need to use them in as a preprocessor. You don't need them in runtime, so it doesn't actually important to have as part of the regular CSS. You can use them as a preprocessor, and it won't affect anything. It's actually going to be just fine. But on the other end of the scope, there's all the CSS in JS world, style component and friends, which I personally don't really like, not because I think it's bad. It's a very, very good solution to a problem that needs to be solved in a different way, because the way it works today, and I am going to take us a bit off track, but the way it works today in most companies, in most development departments, there's the front end, and the front end people do the JavaScript and the CSS and the HTML and the semantics and everything. But I personally, I belong to the Church of the Great Divide. If you remember, the Great Divide was a great article by Chris Crier, who was later noted by Brad Frost, who coined the phrase "the front of the front end and the back of the front end." And I personally believe this is the way it's supposed to be, that people that specializes in CSS, like CSS developers, that specialize everything like in from responsive and performance and accessibility, and those people need to do the front of the front end, and the JavaScript people need to do the back of the front end. And once you do it, once you have this separation, you really just don't need CSS in JS. So again, CSS in JS is it's a great product. It's a great solution to a problem that you currently have, but I wish that it would be solved in a different way. And by the way, on that topic, there is a great article by my friend Elad Schechter that you know, that called "Why the World Needs CSS Developers." So yeah, you should read it. And I absolutely agree. The world actually do need CSS developers. They need the front-end developers that specialize in the front of the front end.
Yeah, I would even go further and say, make this a very bold statement right there. CSS people are good people. So I would just in general say that
CSS people are caring people, maybe.
I'm not saying that anybody else isn't, right? But I'm just saying CSS people are very good people. So we need more good people in the world. So we need more CSS developers. That's kind of my logic right there. But
I have to agree with you, because I think that loving CSS, as I said, CSS people care, but because loving CSS means that you need to care about things like accessibility and the way things look and the way other people see you, what you're doing, the code that you're writing. So yeah, I think that they're more caring. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm very happy to see Wick, a good friend of ours, agreeing to that as well. But this brings us ultimately, of course, to the question I have to ask. Because I just had a conversation with a good friend of mine who is spending a lot of time in JavaScript and Next.js world and styled components and also CSS and JS. And essentially, imagine me going we actually went for ramen. And we ended up in this place having this conversation about the role of CSS and what the CSS is like today and all. And imagine me and a few JavaScript developers around the corner, around the area, right? And all of a sudden, I realized that a very common view in that community is essentially that BAM is dead. Why do we need BAM in 2022? Because we can have scope, we can have all the fancy things, so we don't even have to worry about collisions and things like that, which we try to fix usually with CSS, with BAM, right? So what is your take on this? I mean, on the other hand, also just to finish the thought, on the other hand, the argument goes further that if you do not want to use all those CSS in JS stuff, there is atomic CSS, there is Tailwind. Just go ahead and you have your atomic classes and you will not have any collisions either. You just keep composing the classes until you get what you want. And that's much easier to maintain. Also, your CSS doesn't grow all the time. Which is partly true, I guess. Well, so what's your take on this, Amit?
Well, I actually kind of, I agree and disagree, because yeah, maybe you don't need using, I'm not, BAM is like a general name for a naming convention, because there are other naming convention, and specifically BAM, it's a great convention, and I use like a type of BAM, not exactly, but the use of a naming convention as general is always good. Just because you have a naming convention, and even if you're just using a very small component and or a very small project, even a demo project, so that you don't care about collisions, you still need to. It would be better if you use naming conventions. So okay, so now you can use CSS, all the at layer and the scoping and everything else to so that you don't actually need that or style component, for example, that you don't really need the BAM naming convention, or you don't need naming convention, but it's still semantic. It's still better as best practice. So again, yeah, I agree that maybe you don't need it. That it does make it a bit obsolete, but I think that you still need to do it for other reasons, just because it's best practice.
Yeah, so Mark is saying I might be a heretic, but I never liked BAM. Ooh, bold statement here in the chat, right? But I know people who feel, who just have their own conventions. You don't have to kind of stick to BAM Obviously, if you have something else that works for your team, that's the most important part. As long as you have a shared vocabulary within your team, I think that's perfectly reasonable. But of course, yeah, Amit, go.
Yeah, we started at BAM. There was a company back when in my freelancing day. I've worked at a company, and they said we want to start using BAM everywhere, and we have used it. But the one thing that we did was to shorten all the double low dash and the double dashes just to single dashes, just because it was shorter. And I kind of went with this naming convention to my other jobs after that because it was just comfortable.
Yeah, and that's a very good point by Nico as well. Having the same discussion at work. For us, or for me, BAM is not about avoiding collisions, but about having a unified way of naming CSS classes. It wouldn't be BAM, and if it wouldn't be BAM, there definitely would be a different naming convention in place as well, right?
Absolutely.
And Week is adding to that. I use BAM for my design components. It helps to separate out the elements from blocks to modifiers. Yeah. So what about the atomic CSS or Tailwind at this point? Where does it fit? What problem does it solve? Is it the future?
No.
Are you sure?
I'm 100% sure. So here's the thing. Here's
Convince us.
No, I'm not going to convince you because, okay, first of all, there is a place for things like Tailwind in the future or Tailwind-esque thing because they're always changing. That used to be Bootstrap, now it's Tailwind. Next month's going to be something else. And there is places for this something else. But the problem with all of those frameworks, no matter what, on which, how do you look at it, they can get you very fast, very, very far, very fast. Like can get you 80% of the way in 10% of the time. But if you're going to need, if your project need those last 20%, this final touching and the final personalization of the things, that sometimes can actually take you much longer. If you want to see a good example of a very good subatomic framework, you can see Open Props by Adam Argyle. I told Adam it in private, but I told him I think that his framework actually it shows off what's wrong in all of the other frameworks because it's very minimal. It does exactly what it does and nothing else. Because all of the other frameworks, and you can actually even look at JavaScript frameworks, CSS frameworks, it's the same. They have to build to cover a lot of end cases, and they have to give you a lot of extra information that sometimes you don't even that your design don't even need. So again, this the whole use of frameworks in general, it's great for demos. It's great to get something like off the ground, fast and running, but for a real company, for a real product, never. I never. And I can tell, by the way, I recently was looking for a job, and I got an offer for a company that uses Tailwind, and I said no, thank you, because I don't want to work as a CSS developer and writing Tailwind all day long.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting because in my experience, you see, I think different kinds of companies. So I think on one hand, I get to work sometimes with companies where they have maybe 1-2 people who are writing CSS. And that's, so you have a very small team, then maybe that works for them, because also people who are not familiar with CSS can write something that doesn't break everything on one hand. But of course, I would say, in my experience, the larger the team, the less likely it is that Tailwind is being used. This is kind of the feeling, I guess. Maybe I'm wrong on this, right? But
again, it's also a part of the problem that I talked about earlier, because if the team is made out of full stack developers, okay, and they don't really know CSS and they don't really care about CSS. So yeah, Tailwind, it's a perfect solution. That's what I said. There is a place for Tailwind because it's what they need right now. It's okay. But it's great for a demo or for like a MVP for a startup. But once you go the next step and you actually have your own product and your own design, you can't. I mean, you can, but why? If you're building your own design system, build your own CSS, write your own CSS. Don't use other CSS, because eventually it won't be faster, and you will have more files and less performance.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's also a good time actually right now to ask everyone if you have any particular question you'd like to bring up in a conversation or topic in general. We'd be happy to bring this up as well. At this point, it's kind of a flow of questions coming in because we like to talk about CSS, I guess. And while we have you writing those questions, the topics, one thing that of course we have to mention, and that's something that I'm very excited about, is Cascade Layers, right? So the notion of being able, having the ability to put, so, again, to avoid collisions, for example, and to have things written in a particular order, right? To have people, I think, applying the specific order in the way of how we're arranging the layers, right? So maybe a question from me, Amit, is it changing everything? Like, I don't know, like container queries, or is it,
Again, I don't think, in one hand, again, it's at layers and at containers, for me, it's like in the same slot of what it brings to the table. No, I mean, obviously it brings to two different things, but it's like again, a continuum of what we see outside, because as a world, as a companies, we always think as components, and at layers is just one more answer to a problem that we have. Oh, what happened if we have a lot of components in the same page, which we obviously have. So we need to get the right order, and we need to avoid collisions and so on. So the solution was at layer, again, great solution. But and I don't see it as, it's again, it's a game changer from inside CSS, of the way that we write CSS, because we now have a lot of protections and new ways to do this scoping. But it won't change the way that our sites looking, because the site is still built out of components. It's just going to change the way that we are writing those components inside CSS. Again, huge change. Obviously, I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just saying it's not going to change the outside. It's just going to, but will have a huge effect of how we write the CSS itself.
Right. There is a note coming from Nico at this point. If you're very good or familiar with CSS, do you think you can achieve the same result as Tailwind, for example, with just inline styles?
Well, you can. I want actually seen a YouTube video about inline styles, about is .css redundant, a couple of days ago. I don't know if theoretically, yes, you can, but I don't think that inline styles are very good. Again, this video actually made me think about this whole topic. But as general, I work with outside files, with external files, CSS files, SCSS files, and I think, yeah, you can absolutely get the same result as Tailwind.
Yeah, I think just one note on this. I think I was very surprised actually that while we talk about Tailwind, usually we do think about similarities with inline styles just with classes. But essentially there is a way, and that was really kind of eye-opening to me when I heard about it, I think maybe a year ago or so, that you can write your regular CSS and then compile it into Tailwinds, like just set of classes. And so you have this processing step where you remove you break down all the components on the
think
fly, right? And you kind of create Tailwind.
But then you actually taking Tailwind, because Tailwind actually built on utility classes, okay? And then what you're doing, you just taking utility classes and rebuilding them, and then dismantling it. So you're actually writing CSS. You're not saving code, lines of code in that method. Again, Tailwind is great because they have their own design system in the as a default. So it's great for getting things up and running. I don't think I would use it for real life product or any framework. If you're having your own design system, write your own CSS. I think it's much better.
Right, right. And also just to point out the difference for Nico before we jump to question by Vic. At this point, difference between inline styles and Tailwind. Well, with Tailwinds, we use classes, utility classes for every individual attribute or property that we have in CSS. So in the end, the kind of the big benefit from it, which is at least often seen from Tailwind, is that you end up reducing your CSS massively. Not necessarily the CSS that you write, but the CSS that's being sent to the from the server to the client, because you can essentially gather all the atomic classes that are being used and remove everything else, right? And load only that part on CSS. That's kind of the part of that, unfortunately, right? Question from yeah.
Just one more sentence. When you do write when you write inline style, so for example, you need to write the width, like width 100 pixel, but when you write utility class, you can write width wider, narrower, things like that. You write a word.
Yeah.
You have predefined classes.
And of course, you have limitations because you cannot have media queries or Java states or things like that. But you can do that with some very unique class names potentially, right? I'm wondering if Wick is trolling me. I never know for sure. But Wick is writing, thanks, Amit, for the great talk. Have you ever encountered the GPS CSS methodology? Are you trolling me, Wick? No?
I'm so not. I'm sorry. Yeah, I've just been reading some articles on CSS methodologies, and there's one called the GPS, which is sort of like, how do they call this? Like, I'll put in the article for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. Just curious if Amit knows anything about it, but
I know I'm reading about it right now, but I haven't encountered it before it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll always, when it comes to Wig, I never know. I always feel like, I have to be very careful there. Right? I'll say, oh yeah, that's a great methodology, and then Wig's saying, oh, that doesn't even exist. All right. Okay, well, all right. That's another question that came from Mark. One of the neat things about the frontend in the past was that the written code of others was right there. How do we as a community keep encouraging this in the age of transpilers, right? Where you could look in the code and you would see exactly how the code is written. And now it's just this output of, here we go. Good luck with that.
Well, there are softwares that you can put that dismantle code in, and you get something that is much more readable and neat. And I personally believe, like if you go to my website or to everywhere, my code is not minified at all. It's right there in the open. But no, I absolutely believe there's nothing you can do. It's not minified. All the function names and everything you can see the comments in there and everything, both in the CSS and in the JavaScript, by the way, because I actually do believe it's part of Nico said, and it's, by the way, this is also a reason that I'm very active on platforms like CodePen. Everything I do, all of the animations I've made, always the code is open in CodePen, and you can do whatever you want with it. And people do take some of my animations and implement them in their websites, and great if you did.
Beautiful animations, by the way, if I may say so.
Thank you. So yeah, so I do believe in this in the code is out there, but yes, sometimes today when you work with engines and you work with minifiers, so you get this blob of letters that you can't really read. But there are some softwares that you can. I don't remember the name of one in particular that you can get that they get this code and they rearrange it in a way that you can actually read it and understand what happens there.
Right.
At least in the JavaScript, in the JavaScript, in the CSS, it's not a problem. But if you have the map file, so you can actually go back from CSS to SCSS. But normally nobody published the map file.
Yeah, talking maybe about beautiful code, that might be a good idea to bring up two questions that bother us all, I think, and maybe Amit, you have answers to those questions. First of all, when is it going to end that we're going to have to come up with all kind of tricks and workarounds for custom checkboxes, custom radio buttons, and all those things? Do we still need to do that in 2022?
we still need to do it right now if you don't want to use the regular checkboxes. But first of all, there is the Open UI that I think that they do have solutions to those inputs. This is one thing, and the second thing that it's very easy to do custom checkboxes and custom inputs right now, because you can go to every checkbox and write appearance none and build a label that design it whatever you want.
Yeah, but then, yeah.
I have a very successful animation of a 3D checkbox that you click on and it jumps and turn around. It's completely custom and it's completely accessible and absolutely performant. It's very easy to build your own custom inputs today. Not all of them, but checkboxes and regular inputs, yeah. Date pickers are maybe still a bit more
Yes,
complicated.
yes, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, date pickers and select, but there are solutions to it. And yeah, we are waiting for the Open UI solutions. That the Open UI will actually give you fully customizable web component, so you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah. So this, of course,
But I have no idea about the timeline, by the way. Maybe someone here knows about the timeline. I don't know about the timelines.
Yeah. Well, another thing, of course, that always bothers me because I have to deal with it every single day is CSS support in HTML email. Do you deal with HTML emails a lot, Amit?
I don't work with HTML. You know, who asked that?
Me.
You asked that. Because I was looking for it in the chat. No, I'm not. I haven't written emails for a long time. A few years ago, I was part of a startup that it had a event planning startup, and we used to send massive emails like reminders for the events. So that was the last time that I wrote CSS for webmail. But it was pretty simple. There was nothing too complicated there. So as long as you write, regular plain CSS inline, obviously inline style, and not use anything that Internet Explorer won't support. So yeah, so you can actually use webmail. It's okay. Yeah, CSS in HTML.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe if we could then kind of take a look and peek at the future. And I was told, like when we look back, maybe 1-2 years ago, right? For a very brief moment of time, there was this notion that, okay, now the future is here. CSS Houdini is coming or is here and it's changing everything. And we're going to write CSS the way we write JavaScript, and it's going to be extensible. You can have your custom properties and configuration for your CSS components. Everybody's going to share the components. And this is going to be the world where everybody is going to have just one single date picker, and it's going to be it. And you can customize and do whatever you want with it. And it didn't happen. I mean, why didn't it happen?
Yet. I'm a strong believer in Houdini. I hope maybe I'm just, it's a hopeful wishful thinking. But yeah, Houdini does the second they announce all of these APIs. This is a game changer, obviously, and you can see like the great things that you can do with the at property API, the custom property API, and with the obviously the Paint API, and the typed OM, and there are things that are currently supported, at least in Chromium and in Firefox. So not Firefox, Chromium and one more.
Edge, I think.
I don't remember if it's Firefox or Safari. I think it's Firefox, but I'm not sure. Okay. But yeah, so I have played around a lot with Houdini, and I do think it's gonna change a lot of things. But Houdini actually opened up a door for a lot of things, like the scroll animation API that initially started as a part of the Houdini API, and now it's something completely on its own. So I'm and so many things happens in CSS right now. So okay, CSS is waiting, but Houdini is waiting, but I do think that it would be more commonly supported. I hope it would be supported in the future. I know that the possibilities that it opens are literally endless because again, you
Yeah.
can be your own post processor. You can do whatever you want. Yeah, so it's kind of great. But I'm hoping again. Don't know when. I'm still. I remain optimistic.
Yeah, so for me, Houdini is really, really important because in the end, it allows us to really extend CSS in any way we like, bend it, change so many things. So I'm really hopeful that this is, we will be having sort of a breakthrough at some point, because in the end, it will allow us to share components and reuse them and configure them and very easily, like we do maybe just with a few custom properties, and that would be just almost magical, but not there yet, not there yet. Well, what about web components, by the way? Now that we're talking about CSS, obviously it's not necessarily related to CSS specifically, but I'm wondering, what is the state of web components? Do you see many companies using them?
I don't know about many, but I have seen. I do hear voices of people. I'm using it for this and I'm using it for that. Actually, I even thought about creating this web component of a cube just to create something in 3D because I like 3D when I try to get into the world of web components. Sadly, I didn't eventually build anything. But yeah, I think I do hear more and more companies that build their own components as web components, at least some components, they're trying, because maybe it's nice to see in big companies that they have like one or two developer that says, oh, I'm going to try something new. And they try it, and sometimes it's not even going up for production, but you can see that this company is actually doing something on that direction. So like I hear in when I meet guys in meetups and in conferences, I hear the web component topic comes up.
Yeah,
So
yes, but there's
I
also,
hope it's going to be more and more like commonly used, because I think right now people are kind of scared of it. Not scared, but are not sure what to do with it.
yeah, some of the APIs are maybe not as trivial compared to, I mean, if you are used to React, let's say, just see the only thing, it's all just quite straightforward. I mean, there is a learning curve, but there is quite straightforward. But then when you look into web components, there's you need to understand the shadow DOM boundaries, and there are a couple of things that might not be as obvious sometimes, right?
And the shadow DOM is like a very, not very, but it can be a confusing topic for
Yeah,
some
it's a very
developer.
confusing DOM. I can say
Yeah,
that. Yes,
yeah.
it can be. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. Oh well, maybe if we look in the future, right? Is there anything, I mean, that you feel should be in CSS but isn't yet? Like if you can pick, let's say, a dream list, a wish list
Well,
for, I don't know.
well, if you had asked me that question a year ago, so the answer would have been parent selector. Okay, this is definitely, but the parent selector is now not so dream. It's actually come true. So if I have to choose a dream, I would say a property of depth, with height,
A depth.
depth. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So you mean like the nesting, like how many DOM elements are inside of a particular element, or what do you mean with depth?
I don't know, but maybe if I have like a regular div and I write a width and height of 100 pixels, so now I can have a depth of 100 pixel, and now this div is automatically becomes a cube. I don't know.
Hold on,
And if I give it
are
a
you driving us to the future of metaverse and AR and VR? Is that what you are implying
no,
here?
but I do think that that CSS has its role in 3D, as you know, and I believe in 3D and CSS, and so it would never happen. By the way, okay, nobody will add a depth property to CSS, but you said a dream, so yeah, that's my dream. But my dream is that CSS would support more. Would be more ready for CS for 3D because a lot of people say, and they kind of right, that CSS wasn't meant for 3D. But and again, they're kind of right, but they do have CSS does have the capability of doing 3D elaborate 3D, complex 3D elements and animations and whatever. And I think I kind of proved it over the past few years with a lot of animation that I've done. You know, people when they ask me why I do it, it's like it's a proof of concept. It's like building a concept car. Nobody's going to drive it, but it's a concept that shows that it can be done. So a lot of my animations are just like it, just oh, you can do it. And but sometimes I take these capabilities and I build real life components, just like the checkboxes that we talked about. It's yeah, you can actually take these checkboxes and use them in real life websites right now because it's performant, it's accessible, it's you can use it. So yeah, you can use 3D and CSS, but I wish that you can actually use it better. Again, sometimes we do need to add some hacks. For example, like if we need to build a cube, we actually need to bring in a lot of details and not just say depth. And if we
Yeah.
could add say depth, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's wonderful, wonderful to hear. Do you actually dream in CSS? Do you have like margin zero auto in your dreams, or is it not
In
happening?
my dreams, I know I do have them in like in real life. Like sometimes that I see something and I would wish like opacity 0.5 or like left 10 pixels like the pictures or something, you know. But dream, no, I not there yet.
Yes,
I
that's
do dream. I do dream of animation sometimes, like of things that oh, I really need to do something that moves like that.
right.
But I don't dream about the CSS itself.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. Well, we could saying, well, I wish you are a flex or you were a flex box. Yeah, that's wishful thinking here, I think, at this point. Well, if you do want to learn a bit more with Amit about animations and transitions, just push CSS to the edges of what's possible. And I'm really curious, I mean, what is on the edges? And you will answer that question maybe in just a moment. You can also join Amit in a workshop that he's going to run, a smashing workshop going to run when? I mean, when is it going to be? I didn't check.
Well, it's gonna
So
be in the end of this month. It's 4 days. It's in the end of this month, and maybe I'll put a link here in
I
the.
did, I just added it in.
You just added a link, so well, you're
Yes.
faster than I am. Um, yeah, so it's 4 days, and it's a really deep dive into the world of CSS perspective. And you know, I do have to say that I explore perspective. It's not, I'm not doing just the animation because oh, it's nice to look at. Some yes, but a lot. The vast majority is just me exploring specific topics about perspective and animation. And over it took me a long time to say, okay, now I can understand it well enough to explain it simply enough. Just like Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So it's also the other way around. If you don't understand well enough, you can't explain it easily enough. But it took me a long time to really understand everything, and now I feel like I can move it forward. And this whole workshop, it's 4 days. So the first day is all about perspective and finding yourself inside of this 3D world that CSS builds. And the second day is all about animations and transitions and multi-step transitions and so on and so on. And the third day is about controlling your CSS with buttons and clicks. And you can see some examples that I made exactly like the checkboxes. How do I start animations with checkboxes and so on? And the fourth day is just combining everything together and building these huge, nice animations. I've been working on this workshop for a long time. I'm going to tell you a secret. I'm still working on it, still building some examples that I want to improve. But yeah, it's going to be, I think it's going to be pretty great.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. So, dear friends, if you want to join, you're very welcome to join. I think that this is going to be quite an insightful couple of sessions, which is going to be very, very exciting, really, in terms of for those of us who love CSS. I think that it's a vast majority of people who happen to be in this Zoom room. We are almost at the hour, and I do have my another workshop that I'm running in 6 minutes, so I probably will have to leave a little bit earlier than full hour. So, Amit, do you have a kind of departing words of wisdom for those of us who?
No, I do have to say, I said it before we started, but I do have to say that I started a new job like this week. It's my first week, so I'm now a developer at Wix, and I've written it in my Twitter feed. It's a great place. They have a great product. I hope I won't ruin it. And yeah, if people here do have any questions or just want to talk about CSS or any front end, just hit me up in Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter and follow me there.
Yeah, I assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Wix is not using Tailwind then.
I think not, but actually Wix is so huge.
I know. Yeah.
I think maybe Jonathan here actually knows Wix a bit better than I do, but it's so huge that maybe I don't know. I hope not, but maybe.
Okay,
Don't think so.
Yeah, no, don't think so. Okay.
Okay, this might be changing at some point. Who knows if there is a headwind CSS coming anytime soon. We'll see. It's probably not going to happen. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Amit, so much for joining and being here.
Thank you, Vitaly, for having me.
It's always a pleasure, and I think we'll repeat that at some point. Maybe a year from now, I'll be talking about how Internet Explorer was not a thing, and then it has become a thing, and then it just disappeared again. And hopefully, we're not going to mention Flash next time around. That will be nice. With this in mind, everyone who is joining us, thank you so much for coming. We have a few more events coming up. Please take a look at Smashing Conf as well for everything. This is going to be fun. And we, of course, have recorded the session. So if you came in a bit late, we are going to post it for all the members, of course, so you can actually follow along later. And don't forget to befriend Amit. Amit is a very kind person. And so please follow him on Twitter. And everywhere he goes, it's worth it. All right, everyone, welcome. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming in, and see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Yes, and Mike, we will post it on Slack and also send an email and stuff as well. Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.